The first time I saw her, she was nothing more than a glint on the horizon, a shadow moving with impossible precision across the scorched plains of Karath. 9. I had been stationed there for routine surveying, cataloging mineral deposits, and making sure the mining colonies didn't collapse under the planet's violent storms. Life on Karath. 9 was harsh. Even the sun seemed hostile, a burning eye that pierced the thin, protective canopy of our suits. And yet, when she appeared, it was as if the world itself paused to acknowledge her presence. I had heard stories of her before arrival, whispered among the colonists with awe and fear. The locals called her the Sentinel of the Shattered Plains, a warrior from a civilization far older and stranger than anything humanity had catalogued. They said she wore living armor, forged from metals that shifted with thought, that her eyes could see the weak points in a man's soul as easily as the weak points in his body. But I had dismissed it as exaggeration. Until I saw her. The armor was unlike anything I'd ever encountered. It shimmered in iridescent waves, reflecting the harsh sunlight in colors that shouldn't exist. Each plate moved independently, sliding over her like water over stone, as if it were alive. Her presence radiated authority, danger, and an unspoken elegance that made every human instinct I'd scream in caution. I wasn't supposed to approach. Protocol was strict. No civilian, no surveyor, no one without clearance could come within 300 meters of her. And yet, there I was, a fool drawn by curiosity I couldn't explain. A sudden tremor shook the ground beneath me, and my foot slipped on a jagged ridge of obsidian-like rock. I reached instinctively for something to steady myself, and my hand landed on her armor. The sensation was electric. Her armor was warm, almost breathing under my touch, yet harder than any metal I had ever felt. It vibrated faintly, resonating with an energy I couldn't begin to identify. I froze. Time seemed to slow, the wind halting mid-whistle, the dust suspended like tiny stars around us. Then, she turned her head. I had only a brief glimpse of her eyes, the color of molten copper, and something inside me clenched. "You've chosen me," she whispered. I stumbled back, stunned. My mind raced. Chosen her? I didn't even know her name. Her lips didn't move beyond the whisper, yet her words carried, deep in my chest, as though the universe itself had conspired to ensure I heard them. It was a phrase that promised inevitability and danger, an irreversible bond that I didn't understand but couldn't escape. The wind picked up again, carrying the scent of ozone and scorched metal. She studied me, her armor shifting with subtle gestures, as if it were assessing me, learning my movements. "You've touched what few have ever dared," she said, her voice softer now, almost curious. "And in doing so, you have bound yourself to me." I wanted to ask what she meant, to apologize, to retreat. But some strange part of me, the part that had survived Karath 9 storms, that had catalogued its dangers, that had endured isolation, knew it was too late. Whatever this was, it had begun. For the next 3 cycles of Karath's sun, she appeared at the edges of the mining colony at irregular intervals. Sometimes she watched silently from ridges far above the plains. Other times, her presence was immediate, startlingly close, as though she had been waiting in the shadows of my own thoughts. I began to see that the whispers of the locals were true. Her armor was sentient in some way, responding not just to physical touch but to emotion, to intent. I tried to avoid her, reasoning with myself that proximity was dangerous. But I found it increasingly impossible. Every task I performed, every trek across the plains, seemed to draw me closer to her. And with every encounter, the bond she had claimed in that single whisper deepened. Then came the day when the storms hit with unprecedented ferocity. I was out mapping mineral fissures when a violent vortex tore across the plateau. Rocks rained like bullets, and I was thrown against a cliff face, my suit failing under the pressure. For a moment, I thought this was how it ended. On a barren planet far from home, crushed beneath nature's wrath. And then she was there. Her armor shimmered against the storm's fury, reflecting light like a living beacon. She moved with impossible speed, reaching me before I could even scream. The armor enveloped my body in a protective embrace, stronger than any human-made shield. I could feel the energy thrumming against my skin, harmonizing with my heartbeat. It was terrifying and exhilarating at the same time. "You've chosen me," she said again, her voice unwavering amid the chaos. This time, there was no question, no ambiguity, just the raw assertion of destiny. When the storm subsided, I was safe, lying on the scorched ground with her kneeling beside me. Her eyes examined me with intensity that felt almost invasive. "Do you understand what you have done?" she asked. "By touching me, you have opened a path that may never close." I don't," I admitted, my voice hoarse, still trembling. "I didn't mean to." "You never do," she interrupted gently. "The chosen rarely do. But it matters little. The bond is formed. It cannot be undone." Over the following weeks, I learned more about her and her civilization than any anthropologist or xenobiologist could have hoped. Her people were called the Velithians, an ancient race that had evolved in symbiosis with living armor, integrating consciousness and technology into a single entity. To touch the armor was to make contact with a fragment of their being, an act that could bind or destroy, depending on intent. She was the last of her line, or so she claimed. Her mission on Karath 9 was unclear, even to her, yet every action she took seemed purposeful. She tested me with riddles and trials, both mental and physical, gauging my reactions, my morality, my resilience. Each time, her armor would respond, shifting and adapting in subtle ways that betrayed its awareness. I found myself drawn to her, not just because of the bond, but because I understood, in ways I could scarcely articulate, that her armor was not just protection, it was expression. Every plate, every movement, was a language, a story. And slowly, I began to learn it, feeling the subtle vibrations beneath my fingertips, recognizing the intent behind each shift. One evening, under Karath 9's twin moons, she approached me in the central valley, the ground still warm from the day's radiation. She knelt, presenting herself in a way that was both invitation and challenge. Her armor shimmered with colors I had never seen, and I realized I could feel its pulse through the air, resonating with mine. "You may place your hand again," she said, her voice a melodic echo. "If you dare." I hesitated, but something inside me, a combination of fear, curiosity, and unexplainable trust, pushed my hand forward. I brushed it against her armor. Immediately, a surge of energy shot through me, a wave of understanding and emotion that was both terrifying and beautiful. Her armor seemed to bloom beneath my touch, opening like petals in the sun, revealing glimpses of the consciousness within. "You have chosen me," she whispered once more. "And in choosing, you have accepted what it means to be bound. There is no turning back." I understood then. This was not possession, nor mere attachment. It was symbiosis. Together, we were stronger, capable of feats I could never achieve alone. But with that strength came responsibility. To touch her armor was to accept her destiny as my own, and hers as inseparable from mine. The final trial came when an uncharted storm, larger and more violent than any recorded in human history, tore across Karath 9. The mining colony faced obliteration. Buildings collapsed, equipment shattered, and the colonists were trapped in pockets of debris. I knew we had to act, but no human-made machines could withstand the force of nature. She turned to me, her armor gleaming in the chaos. "Together," she said simply. And I realized that this was what our bond demanded. Together, we moved. Her armor enveloped me partially, guiding my movements, enhancing my strength, my reflexes, and my perception. Side by side, we navigated the wreckage, saving colonists, stabilizing structures, and creating barriers with a combination of human ingenuity and Volithian power. When the storm finally passed, the colony was battered but alive. I collapsed to my knees, exhausted beyond belief. She knelt beside me, her armor folding gracefully around her like a cloak. "You've done well," she said softly. "Not because you are human, not because you are strong, but because you chose to act when it mattered. That is what makes the bond meaningful." I looked at her, the reality settling in. The bond was not punishment, nor was it simple companionship. It was partnership, mutual and sacred. And in that moment, I understood the truth of her whisper all those days ago. I had chosen her, and in doing so, she had chosen me. We stood together, watching the twin moons rise over the scarred plains. Her armor glimmered under the pale light, alive and aware, yet now I felt it as a part of me. The danger, the mystery, the ancient power, it was ours to share. And as I extended my hand once more, not out of accident but of intent, she allowed me to touch her armor again. "You've chosen me," she whispered. And this time, I answered without hesitation, "And I always will." The wind carried our words across the plains, a promise etched in energy and steel. And for the first time on Karath 9, I felt at home. After the storm had passed, Karath 9 lay quiet, scarred but alive. The colonists were safe, and the immediate threat was gone, but the aftermath was daunting. I looked around at the fractured landscape, at the shattered mining equipment, at the tired and bewildered humans who had survived by sheer luck and by the intervention of her. She stood beside me, armor glinting faintly in the dim light of the twin moons. No longer did it feel threatening. It felt like a second skin, a living companion that shared her consciousness. And I realized something profound. This bond wasn't just about survival. It was about understanding, trust, and choice. "You've done well," she said again, her voice calm, yet carrying the weight of something ancient. "But there is more ahead. The bond we share is not merely for protection or power. It is for a purpose." I swallowed, feeling the enormity of what she implied. I had accidentally touched her armor, yes, but the consequences had become irreversible. We were entwined now, not just in proximity, but in destiny. "What purpose?" I asked, my voice tentative. She extended a hand, not in command, but in invitation. The Volithians were never meant to wander alone. We are custodians, guardians of knowledge and energy that can shape worlds. You, human, have chosen to share in that responsibility. Together, we can guide this planet, protect its people, and perhaps even reach farther than either of us could alone. The weight of it hit me. I had started as a simple surveyor, someone who cataloged rocks and storms. And now I was part of something far larger, something that spanned worlds and civilizations. My fear melted into resolve. I accept, I said, placing my hand on her armor once more. It pulsed beneath my palm, warm and alive, and I felt a ripple of connection spread through both of us. In that moment, words were unnecessary. Our bond communicated everything: trust, respect, and the promise of partnership. She smiled, a small, rare expression for one so alien, and yet unmistakably genuine. Then we begin, she said. Over the following cycles, we rebuilt the colony together. I learned her ways, her rituals, the subtle language of armor and movement. And she, in turn, learned humanity through me, the capacity for hesitation, for improvisation, for compassion. Our bond deepened, no longer accidental, but intentional, conscious, and reciprocal. By the time the next storm came, a smaller one, but still fierce, I no longer feared it. With her by my side, her armor merging with my understanding, we faced it without hesitation. Together, we shielded the colonists, repaired the structures, and endured the storm as one entity. Every pulse of her armor matched my heartbeat. Every shift reflected my thoughts. It was as if we had become a single force, one that neither nature nor circumstance could easily defeat. And when the storm ended, there was silence, but it was no longer the oppressive silence of fear. It was a quiet understanding, a shared acknowledgement of what had been achieved and what lay ahead. I looked at her, and she looked back, and in that gaze, I saw not just alien intelligence, but partnership, respect, and even affection. "You've chosen me," she whispered once more, her voice soft against the wind. "And I will choose you again," I answered. "Every time, for as long as we exist." The twin moons reflected off her armor, shimmering like living silver. I knew then that Karath 9, with all its storms and dangers, had become our home. And more than that, we were no longer separate beings bound by chance. We were a team, a symbiosis, a force that could shape worlds and face any threat. As dawn broke over the plains, illuminating the scars of the storm and the promise of renewal, I felt a calm certainty I had never known before. She had whispered destiny into my life with a single phrase, and I had embraced it. Whatever lay ahead, other storms, other challenges, other worlds, I knew we would face it together. For I had chosen her, and she had chosen me, and together, we were unstoppable. And in that moment, standing side by side with the living armor that had once terrified me, I finally understood what it meant to be truly bound, not by fear or accident, but by choice, trust, and destiny. The plains of Karath 9 were no longer just a place of survival. They had become the place where two unlikely allies forged a future together, where the human and the Volithian, the flesh and the living metal, existed as one. And in that unity, there was power, purpose, and the quiet joy of connection that transcended worlds. She whispered again, almost a promise, now rather than a statement. "You've chosen me." And I smiled, placing my hand on her armor one last time, feeling the warmth, the pulse, the consciousness within. And I always will. Together, we turned to face the horizon, ready for whatever the universe would throw at us next.